Why didn't I know about this earlier? How could this be? I've lived a significant part of my life without knowing this important information, without looking at the place I'm looking at now. I often hear this from my subscribers, and recently several of them have directly asked me to record a separate video dedicated to the topic of regretting that they've lived most of their lives not the way they wanted. This is actually a pretty common thing. In psychotherapy, I often encounter people who regret that they started therapy so late, that they discovered themselves, but too late they messed up so much in their lives, broke up with so many people, missed so many opportunities that they really suffer and torment themselves because of it. So let's talk about this today. Hello, my dear friends. My name is Igor Pogodin, and welcome back to my channel. Stay until the end, and perhaps you'll find many answers here that are so important to you right now. At the very least, you'll start to reflect on many things in your life. Human nature, the nature of regret, is the nature of concepts. Because in reality, you can only start from the fact that you have lived a certain number of years of your life. And supposedly, everything before that was lived in vain. But in fact, that's absolutely not true. If I talk about myself, I never asked for what I'm sharing with you today. Not even once did I ask for it. For most of my life, I strove for admiration, fame, and recognition. I wanted to defeat everyone. I was quite competitive. I made a ton of mistakes in my life. I lost relationships that I might not have lost. I made a lot of mistakes. I parted ways with people, and perhaps often not in the best way. I spent 8 years in the army, hating it. I served in the airborne forces. I worked in science. I defended my dissertation and wanted to make a revolution in science. Sincerely, naively, I was always a naive romantic. At the same time, I always completely missed out on my own life, just entirely. At some point, I was acting out of hunger, out of greed. I always wanted more. I wanted more influence, I wanted more love, I wanted more admiration. I kept making the same mistakes over and over. That's how I lived most of my life. Until I realized that I didn't need any of it at all. But did I ever ask for this? No. One fine day, my health changed so radically, so drastically, that I found myself in hell. I've talked about this more than once in these videos. The amount of light in my life suddenly increased by about 1,000 times. I was almost blinded by it. Literally, this winter I woke up, looked out the window, and realized that I was simply blinded by the light. There was so much of it, I couldn't read books, I couldn't look at a screen, I couldn't even look at my phone. I was simply blinded. Just all of a sudden, there was so much more light, for no reason at all, with no explanation. The doctors had no idea what was happening to me. I found myself on the verge of depression. Actually, I was beyond the verge of depression. This could very well have been described as anxious depression or generalized anxiety disorder, because I was anxious 24/7, and my sadness was profound. I started to understand people who commit suicide. It was an extremely difficult period in my life. I thought about giving everything up, going to a monastery, and never practicing psychotherapy again. I couldn't lead groups. I lived in sunglasses, would go outside at night wearing sunglasses, couldn't go to stores, and only led groups under electric lighting, often ending them early because it was unbearable for me. I was terrified, afraid, and angry at life itself. And then, in a single moment, right there in the supervision group, the one who suffered, who was angry, who was consumed by regret, the energy of hatred toward everything that was happening, the despair suddenly disappeared. And nothing was left except love. And it was love for people with whom I had very difficult relationships. For the first time, paradoxically and ironically, my experience of discovering myself as love happened with people, with a group with whom I had had a very tense relationship for several years. Our meeting did not bode well, and this thing that I now call presence simply caught up with me and took over, completely destroying the person I had been before. Did I ask for this? No, I did not ask for this. Does this mean that I have wasted the previous 40 plus years of my life? At the moment when I encountered this, it never even crossed my mind, because it was something like a kind of grace. It couldn't have crossed my mind. I could have regretted that I wasted 8 years of my life in the army, even though I was never really a military person at heart. That's several years of my life, at least from 96 to 2000, up until the moment I defended my dissertation 6 years. 6 years, right? Is that correct? Yes, 6 years I spent on science, which I don't really believe in. What I do is not really science, essentially. It is much more than science. I don't regret it. Everything was wonderful. The army was wonderful. Learning NLP, my affair with the Gestalt therapy and group analysis, where I also got stuck for 6 years. Everything happened. Everything happened at the right time. My first marriage was at the right time. And the breakup in my first marriage, everything was at the right time. No one, remember this, friends, no one has ever made any mistakes. That's impossible. The idea of a mistake appears in your mind only because you believe that what is happening shouldn't be happening. You see what I mean, right? You have expectations. As long as you have expectations, you will always object to what is. And then you will be doomed to regret. At any moment in psychotherapy, when you discover something important, valuable, or new about yourself, you always have a choice to be glad and think, wow, how amazing that I learned this today. God bless you, dear therapist. It's great that I found this out now, and my life is changing right now. Or you can regret it. Regret it with, an anal expression on your face. Your face just turns into a sphincter. Regret that you wasted all those previous years. And you could have done so many good things. You could have been so happy all those years. You couldn't have everything happens in its own time. My wife and I once discussed it. After we'd known each other for several years, we got married, had kids at some point. We talked about whether we could have seen each other and recognized each other as potential partners and life companions 5 years before we actually met. No, we wouldn't even have recognized each other. Why? Because you always meet the person, and at the time, for whom and when you are ready to meet, and never any earlier. You can get ahead of yourself. You don't control this process. You can puff out your cheeks and arrogantly shout that you are the master of your own fate. I need to develop faster. But you are developing within your own infantile, petty, pathetic ego. Only there, and only there, on the level of illusions. Do you think you're cool? Everything in life happens at the right time. Often we try to think in hindsight, damn, I could have done things differently. I could have refused that offer. I could have solved that problem another way. I could have chosen not to hire those employees. I could have chosen not to start that business. I could have started a different business at a different time. No, you couldn't have. Because right now, you're only reconstructing your memories using today's concepts. You're digging through an illusion inside an illusion by means of an illusion. You couldn't have. Remember, Lao Tzu has a phrase like this. It doesn't actually come from Lao Tzu himself, because all we know from him is the Tao Te Ching, but rather from his disciples. In particular, it seems that Zhuangzi refers to this idea, this message from Daozi Lao Tzu. The teacher appears when the student is ready, and not before. By the way, there is a continuation to this phrase, and the teacher leaves when the student is ready. You understand, right? Apply this to any other area. Children only come when you are ready for them. You can have children before you're ready. I have worked a lot and still work with psychogenic infertility. Children come when they are meant to those who need them, but not always in the way you expect. 18 years of eco procedures, sperm insemination, an attempt to use surrogacy, and still nothing. And only at a certain point did people mature, and they had a child. Yes, from a psychotherapeutic point of view, you can notice a change in their concepts. They started arguing less. There was more peace in the family, more peace in the souls towards each other. Their fears, anxieties, grievances toward each other, and inner torment, less in space, was freed up for love, and children appeared. But that too is just a concept. I often say that children, clients, and others come into your life when there is space for them. If there is no space, there will be no children though. Whatever you want, do everything right, and still nothing will happen. Nothing will come of it. Everything comes at the right time, but you don't control that either. People, okay, Igor, tell me, how do I clear space for my clients? I want more clients in my practice. If you act out of a sense of lack, they won't appear. You won't clear the space, no matter what I tell you right now. The space will clear itself, exactly when it needs to. And you'll keep trying today. Igor, we're doing everything you say, and nothing is working. Why? You're in a state of total lack right now. So what do you need? To discover your own nature of abundance, the nature of plenty. And only then, naturally, you will mature. The space will appear, the client will appear. Not before. It won't happen before that. That's why you couldn't do anything. Even if you blame yourself for the fact that you could have acted differently, if you could have, you would have. It was this thought that came to your mind. Do you think it was by chance? No. Did you latch onto it by chance? No. Maybe several thoughts came to you, but you engaged with, clung to this one. By chance? No. Did you become its slave? Yes. Could you have done otherwise? Theoretically, yes. Practically, no. Everything that happens in our lives corresponds to our level of maturity. Everything that happens in our lives depends on the degree of our tolerance, maturity, and childishness. If we are immature, we encounter certain events and process them in an immature way. If we are mature, we encounter a different level of events and process them in a different way. Sometimes people say that in life we are only given what we can handle. I think that's just another concept. I don't know if that's true, but I do know that if a certain event has come into your life, it means you are ready to face it. But that doesn't mean at all that you will handle it well. No one knows. That's freedom. And perhaps the only real freedom you have is how you go through this event, whether you remain a reaction and a concept or move toward your true nature of presence. That's the only choice you have. If you remain a reaction, a concept, life will start to break you. Sooner or later, you must discover your nature of presence. But perhaps life will keep breaking you for quite a long time. And that means that's how it has to be. In time, you will be ready to see the presence within yourself. And whatever happens, whether you close your eyes, think about something, listen to loud music, cover your ears and eyes, and get into a flotation tank, or go into a special room for a dark retreat, you will always be. Whether you see it or not, you always, the one who truly is, remains always. And you will start to notice this. You will begin to discover that no matter what happens in your life, there is something unchanging, the one who always sees it. Regardless of what feelings you are facing right now, or what concepts might be trying to control your life at this moment, you are that unchanging presence that makes them possible. And so, having seen and tasted the presence, not knowing how this will happen in your life in my case, it did not happen easily. But if it happens in your life more easily, more gracefully, and with more care for you, well, that would be wonderful. I would be happy. You won't be able to tear yourself away from this anymore. You will feel who you are, who you truly are. This might be the best thing that ever happens in your life, my dear ones. So that's exactly why nothing ever really happens any earlier than it should. And in the same way, nothing ever actually happens any later than it should either. You may regret what is happening, but know that in those moments, it is your concepts that are controlling you. In reality, everything happens exactly on time, at the right moment, and there are no coincidences. Wishing you strength, and most importantly, wisdom and patience. And don't forget that you are presence itself. And then everything will happen at the most suitable time possible. This was Igor Pogodin with you. If you think this video could help your friends or loved ones, don't hesitate, feel free to share it. And I'll see you in new videos. Bye!